So what we're going to cover today is the year-end procedures. What I'd like to do, if at all possible, if you're at a spot where you can log into the browser, I'd like to confirm that everybody can log into the JAMIS Open University and access the materials that you'll need following today's session. So if you would, go ahead and log into the JAMIS Open University and just raise your hand when you're on the home page. And raise your hand if you're just going to watch and not follow along. This is the only hands-on part for today, by the way. This is not a hands-on session, but I want to make sure that everybody's able to find the materials. So for those of you that are logged in, I'd like you to go to Courses and On-Demand Learning, which is your personal dashboard. And under Register for Classes is a session for today, Financial Period Close and Reconciliations. So if you click on that, it's going to open up another window. And then if you click on JAMIS Period Reconciliation and Close, and you want to go to the Additional Materials radio button. Now I'm going to walk through most of this as it pertains to year-end today, but I want to make sure that everybody has access to these materials, especially what we're going to talk about at the end, which is the new 2020 reporting requirements and how you're going to make that happen. So today's session is about period end, the year-end procedures. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the article that we have on year-end procedures. The first step in year-end procedures is to have ended each period throughout the year following all of our best practices. So I do want to remind you that on your company training page, you do have financial period best practices and checklist. So year-end obviously starts with each period throughout the year having been reconciled. So on your company training page, you have a section for general ledger and period reconciliation. And there are procedures, there's some hints to help you follow the procedures, and then there's a checklist to facilitate all of the steps in a period end. So on your company training page, this checklist is unique to your company. So you can follow this each period. You can also customize it to modify it to your steps or any other instructions you'd like to add or delete. So as I said, today with year-end starts with the assumption that you have been following those procedures and that you have reconciled every period throughout the year. And then today follows that with our year-end procedures. Now, if you have monthly procedures that are working for you and you're not following mine, that's fine. The key is to make sure that you have reconciled each of the periods of the year. So one of the things that I found when I started on JAMIS Prime, the hardest part of JAMIS Prime's year-end is that it's so simple, I feel like I forgot something. Prior to working in Prime, my year ends were not all that trouble-free. And all of the steps in year end were nerve-wracking and complex. So it took a lot of getting used to when I started in JAMIS Prime that year end is so simple that for the first couple of years, I kept thinking I must have forgotten something. But really, if you're following each period doing the reconciliations, the year end really only has a couple of things to discuss that are any different than individual periods. But for the most part, year end is just another month in the year. So in order to prepare for year end, you do want to make sure that you've reconciled each of your periods, and that mainly involves closing open documents. Open documents in the context of period end, whether it's a financial period or a year period. Closing open documents refers to documents that are open or balanced. They're not released. It doesn't mean that you have invoices that either haven't been paid or you haven't been paid for. It's referring to unreleased transactions or processes in any of the modules. You want to make sure that you've generated any recurring documents, and you want to make sure that you performed allocations. However, there is a very important caveat that I want to bring your attention to about your recurring or allocations. So I'm going to log into JAMIS Prime. And again, this is not a hands-on session. Year end is got steps that really only one person can follow. So unfortunately, you're just going to have to watch. But you'll get lots of fun doing this hands-on in your own company. So I'm going to sign in to my year-end company. And I want to caution you about a couple of things. So I'm going to go first to allocations. So under Project, Allocation Rules, I'm going to pull up my fringe allocation. And what you'll notice is that this allocation is auto-reversing. So throughout the year, this is an allocation that I want to reverse each period so that I can do a new year-to-date calculation. But I don't want it to reverse in January. So there is an assumption for today's context, and all of you may not be on a December year-end, but the procedures are the same regardless of when your year does end. So whatever is the last month of your fiscal year, you want to review your allocations. And if they reverse next period, you want to make sure that you do indeed want this allocation to reverse in January. So before running your allocations in the last month of your fiscal year, review this auto reverse setting. Now, in years past, there's been a few allocations that reverse, and users did want them to reverse in January. But for the most part, such as this fringe allocation that I have, I don't want it to reverse in January. I want January to start new. So in that case, before I run the December year-to-date allocation, I'm just simply going to uncheck this flag so that this doesn't auto-reverse. Then I'm going to process the allocation as usual, and once I release the allocation, I want to return and check this to reverse next period for starting in January for the next time I run this allocation. I find fewer instances of this, but in Finance General Ledger, recurring. You can have recurring journal entries that also auto-reverse. So this is just a batch that's going to generate your recurring, but it's the journal entry itself that you want to make sure is not auto-reversing. Or if it is, that you validate whether you want it to auto-reverse in January. So I find frequently that the allocations do need to be turned off for reversing in January, but journal transactions is on a case-by-case basis. If it's prepaid, they probably do need to auto-reverse, but if it's for some other reason, you'll have to consider that. Now, some of you might want to say, well, what happens if I didn't listen and I went ahead and did my allocation and it auto-reversed? You just need to be aware that when you open the period for January 2021, you will have automatically posted a journal entry to reverse December's allocation. So we'll just have to reverse the journal entry. Most people are disappointed to have the activity reflected in January, so you can avoid it by not reversing it. But if for some reason you've already run your allocations or you forget this step, you will have to go in January because it will automatically post, and you'll have to go in and reverse the journal entry. Okay? All right, so back to the list. Let me see a show of hands of those of you that are using the JAMIS Assets module. Anybody on this call using JAMIS Prime Assets? Okay, good. I see quite a few hands up. So we do have instructions for each period when you're using Assets module, how to end a period, which are the instructions for how to convert your assets and how to calculate your depreciation. So similar to how you would do every period, you want to make sure that before you go into year end that you have depreciated and converted all of your depreciation and assets. So there is a special set of instructions for those of you that are indicating that you're using the Assets module. Okay. All right. Then our normal monthly or period steps are to validate account balances, clear the suspense account, and then run the trial balance. Now, we have a discussion in every period end training, the difference between deactivate and close. And if you've noticed, I'm not always very good at it, but I do try to refer to it as period end and not close, because I don't want to confuse the fact that in Prime, there are two different ways to end a period. So if I go to our periods, Finance, Manage Financial Periods, and here's my current year, a box that's active, so any period where the active box is selected, that means that that period is available, it's active, and will accept transactions dated for that period. Any period that is deselected, where the box is unchecked, those are periods that are deactivated and will not accept transactions from any module in that period. So we typically find that most users would prefer to deactivate throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, which is not January, it's usually more like March or April, once all year-end entries are validated and the auditors have come back with their review, when you're sure that everything is completed for the year, then you can actually close the year. Now, before I do any closing, because I've already deactivated some of my periods, I am going to demonstrate close, which I only do after my auditors have signed off on my fiscal year. But before I do that, I do want to call your attention to adding to the trial balance. So even though I'm not closed, I can run a trial balance for December. So my fiscal year in this company does run January to December. So without closing, I can run December financials and I can run January financials. So let me go show you the trial balance as an example of my financial reports. So I'm going to run this for December 2019. And For my GL accounts that are expense accounts, you'll notice that in December, I have balances in my expense accounts. And we just saw that I have not closed any modules. So let me rerun this for January 2020. And you'll see that I have no expenses. So I don't have the same carryover. So even without closing, I have a correct financials for December, and I can run the correct financials for January. The reason being is that your financials, similar, such as this I'm demonstrating here with your trial balance, are date driven. So it doesn't require a close of the year in order to get your reports. And the other thing that is takes a little getting used to is there is no journal entry to clear your accounts. Since the financials will summarize based on the date, there is no need to do a journal transaction to reclassify expenses. So I get this question quite frequently at every new year, that when somebody runs their January ledgers, they want to see the journal entry that moved everything out of expense. And there is no journal entry. It's all being produced based on the dates of your transactions. So, and those reports, real time, will produce what's accurately, even though I have not closed the modules. So closing doesn't affect our procedures. It's just a way of tidying things up and making sure that years that are truly finished are closed. But running the close process is not necessary to rush into. Now, one of the key differences between activate and deactivate and the actual close process is that if I deactivate a period, it's very simple to check the box and reactivate it. So in April, when my external accountants come back and give me some adjustments that they want to see made, then I can just reactivate the period, process whatever adjustments they felt was necessary, and deactivate the period. When you close, there is no reopen. So once you close, you are closed. Now, you do have the option in the general ledger preferences to elect that if you close the period and now you need to get an entry in, you can ask that you can enter into a closed period. So normally this is always unchecked, allow posting to closed periods. But if I closed prematurely and now find that I have entries to enter, I can enter transactions if I check this box. But I try very hard to just deactivate until I know that I'm really confident that it's time to close. So does anybody have any questions about deactivating versus closing? Anybody on the call that wants to supplement that with anything? Does anybody have any additional information to add? All right. So let's go back and take a look at our financial periods. I want to go look at 2015. Because I did make you a promise, if you've ever been in the period end reconciliation session, I did make you a promise that if you followed our procedures and our best practices, that when you close on the last month of the year, you only have to close once, and it will close all prior periods at the same time, assuming you've been following the procedures. So you can see here that the financial periods in 2015 have not been closed. In order to have the general ledger closed for this year, you first have to close each individual module. So let's go close AR. So I'm going to go to Accounts Receivable, and I'm going to go to the the Reports tab, and you'll notice that there is Open AR Documents. I need to make sure there are no open documents in the periods that I want to close. So I'm going to look at January 2015 through December and run the report. And you'll see that I have a number of unreleased transactions. Again, this is not open as in they're unpaid on the aging. Open means they're unreleased. So they're either in an on hold or balance status. So I have to do something with these transactions. And when we do deactivate, I ask that everybody clear this report in each of the modules. In doing the actual close instead of deactivate, it will not close any period where there are unreleased transactions. That's the reason it's on our period reconciliation steps. Now, from this report, I can click on the reference number, and it will take me to the transaction. And then there's only one of three ways to dispose of this. Either it should have been released, and I just need to release it. It was a mistake, and it should be deleted. Or I need to move it to another period. And in this case, it's open because I didn't apply it. So I'm going to apply this payment. Save and release. Now, if I refresh the report, that item's gone, and I would just move down to the next item on the list. So whether you should release it, delete it, or modify it to another period, that's up to you. It depends on the document itself. But you'll have to do one of those three things in order to be able to physically close the period. So I'm going to delete this one. This was a bogus entry. And then I'm going to go back to my report and refresh it and work my way down the list. So each module has a similar report. So in AP, we have open AP documents. And you're going to do the same thing. So for each module, you're going to make sure that there are no unreleased transactions. And you do that before you close. But as I said, to close, we have to first close each individual module. So I'm going to go to AR, and I'm going to go to my processes, and I'm going to go to close financial periods. So each of your modules on the processes tab has a close financial period. Now again, imagine that today is April, several months after my period. And I'm going to click on close financial periods, and it's going to show me the earliest periods that need to be closed. Now, this is a company that I play with year after year to show year end. But if I followed the procedures, and I might not have, I can simply select all periods and say close. And now it closed all of those in one step. And now it's asking if I want to close the next year. So I'm going to go ahead and close those. And so on. So when or if you're ready to do close, you want to make sure you have all of your entries in. You want to run the open documents for a module. And then if there are no open documents, you can close the periods. And as I promised, as long as there's no open documents, you can close all of the periods at once. So now if I go back and look at our financial periods, you'll see that in 2013, my AR is all closed because we just successfully closed 2013 for AR, and we also closed the AR module in 2014. So you see all of them closed. The GL will automatically close once I go through the close in each individual module, but it will not close this year in the GL until all modules that I have activated are closed individually in that module. So does anybody have any questions about the timing or the steps of closing, the actual closing procedures, or anything that they want to add from prior experiences? Okay. All right. So let's go back to our checklist. So we've done the closing a period in the subledgers. And I guess the most important thing I should have pointed out before starting through these steps is I strongly recommend that you read this entire article before starting. I wouldn't just read through this and as you get to a step, start it. But I would read the entire article first and then execute the steps when the time is right. Rudy, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. If for some reason, will the system allow you to close all of those modules if, and this may be a whole different part of it, if your balance sheet were out of balance or your trial balance or something was out of balance, would there be a red flag while you're going through the closing process to close every one of those modules?
No.
So it'll still allow you to close that even if like the balance sheet was out of balance?
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing it's going to look at is whether there's open documents.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay? And that's why I'm so careful to keep repeating myself. I know, I apologize for those of you. But we do have a checklist, and making sure that you're reconciled before you do anything else is the key step of the reconciliation steps. Because I want to make sure you are reconciled before you deactivate or close. Okay? Thank you, Rudy. All right, now we talked about closing periods, but before I close the year, I first need to open the new year. Now, many of you, if you're new to JAMIS Prime, you probably have several years already set up for you. Your implementation teams do an excellent job of preparing you with future years. But at some point, you're going to have used up those years, and you're going to have to generate your own financial year. Again, some things are so simple that that's the hardest part for me to get used to. It's important that you know to create and activate your first period after what you're closing before deactivating or closing any financial period. So let me go to my financial periods, and I'm going to go to 2020. What I mean by that is I do not want to deactivate December or close any of the modules until I have 2021 financial period created and I have January or whatever the first month of my fiscal year is active. So again, it's simple, but the timing and knowing what to do is the most important part. Now, to generate a new year, and as I said, many of you may already have more than 2020, because I recognize some of you are relatively new. And your implementation teams usually give you a couple of years. But eventually, you're going to need to know how to create a new year. So in this company, I'm out of years. 2020 is the last one I have. So I do need to create a 2021. To do that, I'm going to add a new record. And it automatically knows that it's 2021. As soon as I hit the plus sign, it's only going to let me add the next year that's missing. And then I'm going to go to generate periods. I'm going to activate January. That's the key. You do not want to close or deactivate December without first having January active. And then I'm going to save. So now I have my 2021 periods ready to go. And even if you're not on a calendar month, it's going to calculate your new year based on your fiscal year structure. So regardless of what your periods are, it should be add a new record, it'll default the year, generate the periods, activate the first period, and save. Pretty simple. Now, in addition to creating my financial periods in the general ledger module for the new year, you also want to consider your time card periods. And you may need to create your time card period sooner than you needed to create a financial period. So I would check your time card periods independent of whatever you found with your fiscal year. So I'm going to go back to JAMIS Prime. I'm going to go to Human Resources, Labor, Configuration. And I'm going to go to my time card schedules. Now, you shouldn't have as many schedules as I do, except for one or two of you. But whatever schedules you have, you need to make sure that you have time card periods at the start of your new year. So I'm going to open up one of my time card periods, schedules, and you can see that the last period that exists in this schedule is 2018. So I need 2019 and 2020 and 2021. But I purposely have it backwards because I need to do this webinar several times, and I wanted to have some years that I could add in each of the webinars. But now, assuming that it was 2020 and I need to add 2021, I pull up the schedule and click on Add Detail. It automatically already knows the start date of your period. So it's going to default in when it's going to generate the start of the next period. It will not allow you to have a gap. You enter the standard hours. Now in this example, it's a part-time schedule, so it's a standard of 30 hours a week. Depending on your schedules, it might be 40 if you're on a weekly, it might be 80 if you're on bi-weekly, and it could be 86.67 if you're semi-monthly. And then you're going to tell it how many periods do you want to generate. So I'm going to say that I want 26 periods. Hopefully that gets me the whole year of 2019. And do generate. Oh, this was weekly. Sorry. So you can see, though, it works exactly as it says. It was weekly. I asked for 26 weeks, so that got me halfway through the year. So to create new time card periods, you're going to retrieve your schedule, add detail, enter the standard hours, and the number of periods you want to generate. And that's all there is to it. You may not want to open the period yet. Sometimes I find that at the start of the year, some people are planning some changes. So you may not want to open the time card period yet, but you do want to remember to generate it. So it does exist when you are ready to open. If you do have more than one schedule, you'll have to repeat this for each schedule. Rudy, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry about that. The hand was still up.
Oh, that's okay. My bad. Let's see. Genesis, could you go off mute and ask your question out loud? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, so I just want to know how soon we could add the new time card schedule for 2021, for example.
You could add it anytime. You could add it today if you want.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. There's no contingency on adding new time card schedules. You just may not want to open them yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh. So there's not an association to the financial calendar. I just group it here so that while I'm thinking about my new year, I want to think about everything that the new year might affect. So that would be opening time card schedules and then visiting whether or not I need to do anything for my holiday schedule. So let me go to labor configuration and go look at my holiday schedule. And I'm going to have to update my dates for 2021. So I'm going to usually leave the December 31st and January 1st in here because they probably haven't finished doing their December 31st time cards yet. But I do want to add the new dates for the holidays if you're using holiday schedules to populate your time card. Not everybody uses the holiday schedule feature, but I think most people do. So just remember that in addition to generating time card periods, you're going to want to update or change the dates in your holiday schedule for your 2021 holidays. And I'm simply just going to go in here and make this January 20, 2020, or whatever the real date was. And then it'll change it. So I'm just going to type over each date and save until I've added all of the correct dates for 2021. So on the year-end procedures, you want to validate that you have your new year with a period active. You want to verify or generate new time card schedules. And you want to update your holiday schedule if you're using the holiday schedule. So does anybody have any questions or comments about having done this in years past or working with others on any of these items? Or does anybody have any questions on doing any of these steps in your own company? Okay. So as I said, really the year end, if you've been following our period reconciliations, year end is very little more than just any other period. So the long pole in the tent, or the most important steps, are to conduct your December or your last period's reconciliation. So that's going through the steps for December. And if you haven't been following them, then you'll have to do them for the entire year. But you want to make sure that you've gone through the period steps. Then the few things that are unique about year-end would be deciding when you're ready to actually close, knowing that you don't have to close to get your financials correct, and that when you close, you do it by closing each subledger, each module separately, and that your financial reports are date-driven. So whether you deactivate or close, you should be able to get financial reports that are accurate for both the last month and the first month of your overlapping years. But before you can deactivate, even if you're not closing, before you can deactivate your December period, you want to make sure that you first activate the period of the next year. And I've repeated that a lot, I know, but that's very important. And then you want to make sure you have time card schedules and holiday schedules. So that's really all there is to it. Now, when I go back to actually going through any of these steps, if you've come from other software prior to this year, even a prior version of JAMIS, it may have been necessary that you had to make a copy of your company before you could execute your year-end procedures. In JAMIS Prime, it is not necessary to make a copy. However, I do have on the list to make a test copy once you've done all the reconciliations. When you're ready to close the periods or generate periods or do anything that's a one and done step, I'm only recommending that you make a copy so that you can run through these steps and test. And that's more for your own comfort. The software does not require it. And what you do in test, you'll have to do in production. But I know that in some software, you had to make a copy at year end. In JAMIS Prime, as I demonstrated by running the trial balance, it is not necessary to make a copy. The only reference to running a copy and doing this in test is for your own comfort level, so that you can run through the steps, see the results, generate your financials before doing anything in production that you're not happy with. So You can ignore this step. That's why it's just a hint and not a requirement. And that's only for your own comfort level. Now, other than getting to what I think most people are interested in, which is the talk about 1099s, does anybody have any questions about period procedures or year-end procedures? Other than 1099, is there anything that you would have expected be addressed based on your experiences that maybe I neglected to cover? Does anybody have prior year experiences, either your own or somebody else's, that you'd like to ask or share? Because I know there are several of you on this call that have been with JAMIS Prime a couple of years. So I didn't know if you had any best practices or lessons learned that we would all benefit from. Okay. Well, since I don't see any hands up or anything in the questions box, I'm going to go ahead and start talking 1099s. The most important thing, if you leave with nothing else today, please leave with the fact that you do not, and I don't usually say not, I don't try to teach in the negative, but in this case, I want to make it perfectly clear. You do not want to close your 1099 year until you've produced your 1099s and you've given your recipients time to come back if there's any adjustments or disagreements about the 1099 that you gave them. You can produce your 1099s, you can file your 1099s without closing the 1099 year. But does anybody on this call know why I'm stressing the fact that you do not want to close your 1099 year prematurely? Anyone? Simone, do you want to say?
I knew you were going to put me on the spot. Well, because you can't, it's the same thing. You won't be able to reopen it if there's any changes or anything like that that you need to make.
Correct. And I think Simone would agree with me that in all prior years of JAMIS Prime, the number one issue that we have to deal with are people having prematurely closed their 1099 year and finding that they weren't finished with accounts payable. Now, earlier I said you could close the subledgers, and we had a get well procedure to be able to post into a module. There is no getting around, there is no get well once you've closed your 1099 year. So I'm just asking everyone to be patient, give yourself time, because there is no reason to rush into closing the year. It has nothing to do with starting a new year. It has nothing to do with producing your 1099s. But Simone, I think you might agree that the bulk of issues around prior years has been people needing to enter AP documents and they couldn't because they closed their year.
That's correct.
So I will show you that, and I'm almost reluctant to, but if I go to Finance, Accounts Payable, there is on the Processes tab, there's Close 1099 Year. And as I said, you can close the year, but only after you filed your 1099s and the recipients have had a chance to dispute any 1099 you might have sent. Because you might need to enter additional AP documents in order to correct their 1099. Once you close a 1099 year, you will not be able to enter AP documents in that fiscal year anymore. Whether you've closed the module in the GL, and if the period is active, once you close the 1099 year, you will not be able to enter in that year in accounts payable. So if there's any one caution, just delay closing the year.
You know, May, I'm sorry. I have also, I had one customer, and this is just their best practice, because they do tend to, after they send their 1099s, there usually is changes, modifications, things that they need to go back to AP and add items and stuff like that. So they don't do the AP either, because that's kind of like they wait until after that. So, I mean, if you feel that you're going to be having those type of changes and it's a possibility, you know, I would just wait, like May said, until you get everything back, you know, there's no changes, then you can go ahead and close. So we do have a lot of people that wait like until February, you know, to do their close, or even into March, depends on how late they send them out. But that's just something else just to add to that, May.
Thank you, Simone. Now, I have a trick question for anybody that wants to answer. I've shown you where to go to close your 1099 year. Does anybody know how you open a 1099 year? How am I going to open 2021 as a 1099 year? Does anybody want a chance a guess?
We contact JAMIS support.
That's a good one, Hamza. Thank you. Actually, there's no physical or manual opening of a fiscal year for 1099s. What opens a 1099 year is the first payment that you generate for a 1099 AP bill in 2021. So while there is a manual step or a physical step to close the year, there's nothing you need to do to open it. It will automatically open the year when you generate a payment to a vendor whose bill has 1099 information on it. So it opens automatically. And I often get phone calls where someone is opening everything else and they want to go open the period. There is no opening the 1099 period. It automatically opens when you generate a document in 2021 that has 1099 information on it.
I am so glad you said that, May. That is a #1 question for us all the time. It never ceases to amaze me with that question, but I'm glad you're mentioning it in the training. So everybody now knows you don't call support.
Now, other than that caution, that used to be the end of what I discussed about 1099. I do want to remind you that you can make corrections to your 1099 information. If you're following our period steps, you should have been correcting your 1099 information all year long. My goal was to minimize the January 1099 event, because I used to witness a lot of people frantically trying to correct a year's worth of AP documents so that they could produce their 1099s. So we've made that a period process, that you validate your 1099 information each period. So when it's time to do your 1099s, it should just be a non-event, or hopefully, but not a horrendous activity like it was before. But to correct, just to show you how to correct a 1099, if I run the 1099 report, and this is either at the end of the year or I should be doing this every period, I'm going to go to my accounts payable reports, and I'm going to go to the 1099 year details. And I'm going to run my 1099 year. And this detail is going to list for me every bill that was a payment to the vendor. So in JAMIS Prime, your 1099 information is entered on your AP bill. It becomes part of the 1099 totals when you pay that bill. So now suppose in comparing this to my payment activity, I find that there's either an invoice here that shouldn't be, or I find that it's missing a payment that should be included on the 1099, either way. So I'm going to show you how to quickly correct your 1099 information. So I'm going to go pull up 1309. So I'm going to go to my work area, bills and adjustments, and I'm going to pull up 1309. Now the scenario could be either way. In this case, this is a closed invoice. If I look at the applications, it was closed because we generated a payment. But on the document details tab, the reason that this invoice was on the 1099 is because in the 1099 box, I have it selected to report as rent. Now, it could be that we forgot to select the 1099 box, so I might need to add it, or it was selected and it shouldn't have been included. So either way, you come to the 1099 box on the grid, and as soon as you click in it, and this is a little trick because this could get frustrating, you're not going to use your you're going to use your backspace to clear the field and then tab out. There's no selection that's blank. So you don't want to do the drop-down list to try to clear the field because there's nothing to select that's blank. So to clear the field, you simply click in the field, backspace, and tab, and that will clear the box. Now the reverse is true. Suppose this invoice was supposed to be included and wasn't. Then I'm going to come to the 1099 box and select the rent or whatever is the appropriate category and save. What's awesome about JAMIS Prime is that you can modify even a closed AP bill. Notice everything else is locked down. I can't do anything else on this bill. But the only field that's open is the 1099 box. So even though it's closed, you can correct the 1099. Again, if you were doing this each period, you could nip it in the bud. But if you haven't, then you want to get started now auditing your 1099. And we do have a report that you can see all of your 1099 information without printing the 1099s. This is just a report that shows you what information is going to be on your 1099s when you produce them. After I reconcile the detail, I do like to look at the summary. The reason being is that this summary shows me their tax ID number. So you can see that I have a vendor who I plan to submit a 1099 to, and shame on me, I don't have a tax ID number in the system. So again, looking at this every period, I could be making sure that that information is corrected before the due date in January for producing the 1099s. So that's how simple it is. And that used to be the only discussion about 1099. Wait and correct. But this year, we have something exciting to add to our year-end procedures. Raise your hand if you're aware of, hold on just one second. Amalia, did you have a question?
Yes, how are you? It's Amelia.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I had a question about if you needed to change the amount, the 1099 amount. For example, if you included expenses and didn't want to.
So if you're processing that invoice, that AP bill for the first time, you would separate into two lines. One that would have 1099 information and another row that wouldn't. So in your case, I would separate services from travel, and on the travel line, I would deselect the 1099 information so that only the services was reported. Now, I think the question you're really asking, though, is I processed the bill, everything was on one line. Now I realize that that line included an amount for travel that I don't want to report.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
In which case, you're going to have to do an adjusting bill. So you'll have to reverse the line that you had everything charged to and re-enter it onto two lines. So it's a zero AP bill. So our best practice in any AP correction is that you go to accounts payable work area, and in JAMIS Prime as a standard philosophy, you always go to the source. So in your case, Amelia, the source was an AP bill. So I'm going to create a new AP bill, but it's going to be for zero amount, because I think in your case, we're not changing the total amount due the vendor. You're just changing the split between what's 1099 reporting and what's not.
That's correct.
So I'm going to leave the amount zero, but I'm going to copy everything else from the original bill. So I've got my vendor, the date. I will have to modify the vendor reference so that it's an adjustment, because it won't let me have a duplicate. But then in the distribution, I'm going to enter the same row that was here. The only difference is that my extended cost would be a credit, so I would put a minus sign. And then I would add two rows, one with 1099 and one without. The sum of the three rows will be zero, so I'm not going to change the amount due the vendor. I'm just changing the distribution of how we split it.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you, Amelia?
It does. It does. Thank you. That's what I needed. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? Yes. Yasu? Yasu, did you have a question? I think you need to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, it's a follow-up question for Amelia. So once you try to correct the lines with zero bill, is this bill is going to be posted, or what's going to be the final step?
You're going to release it, but JAMIS Prime does something unique when it's a zero bill. So if this amount that I had left this amount zero, when you release it, it goes straight to closed. So it's not going to show up on a remittance advice or anything else. It's just going to be a closed AP bill that changes the distribution from one line to two.
How about the posting period? Does it has to be the same, or?
Well, that's really up to your company. A few of our clients are not able to enter into a prior period. So that's really up to you. I would, in this particular example that Amelia was asking about, I would have done it in the period that it applied to. Since it's a zero change to anything on the financials. But not everybody's able to reactivate a prior period, so it's really up to your company. You will have to do it within the year if you want it to reflect on the 1099 for that year.
Yeah.
Okay? Did that answer the question?
Yes. What if we have a vendor everything, but we missed the information like maybe the vendor ID, the tax ID, how do you modify it?
So if I, like in the example I showed, I have a vendor I've been paying and shame on me, I didn't have their tax ID number. But
Yeah.
after looking at that report, I know I need to get it. So once I obtain their tax ID number, I'm just going to go to the vendor.
Okay.
And I'm going to go to their purchase settings, and I'm going to enter their document number here.
Okay.
Okay? Their tax ID number in their vendor file. And as soon as I do, it will then print on the summary report, real time.
Okay, what if a vendor was set up incorrectly? It should be a 1099 vendor, but it wasn't like a 1099 vendor. How do you do for the whole year?
Well, you're going to go to you're still going to retrieve the vendor file. Mm-hmm. You're going to go to the general info, and you're going to check the box to say that they are or are not, depending on which way the error goes, and then select the 1099 bill. But once you do that, you're going to have to go to each of their individual bills and add the 1099 line, as I just demonstrated a minute ago.
It's invoice.
Yep. But you have to make sure the vendor is set up correctly before you can start modifying the invoices. But assuming they weren't selected to be 1099 and they should have been, you're going to do what I did here, check the box, which makes their box selection available, select the box on where their 1099 information should be reported as, but then the next step is to go to each bill and select that box in the grid.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
And there are instructions. I know some of this I may be going over rather quickly, but I do want to make sure everybody's aware that on the JAMIS Open University, some of these things that I'm quickly going over, there are written instructions for that you can access. So I just think it's important to talk about the 1099 reporting corrections, but the information that I shared is written here for you to reference. The same with what we just walked through with how to enter missing 1099 data. So there are step-by-step instructions for that. So if I'm going a little too fast for today, Yasu, then you do have access to reading the directions. Okay?
Okay, but I didn't see that in my JAMS Learning and Development.
So to get to it, it's not on your company training page. It's under On Demand, Accounts Payable. This particular item, that's the 1099, you're going to log into the JAMIS Open University, go to the courses and On Demand, and then on this dashboard, you want to go to On Demand, Accounts Payable. And on this page, we've got FAQs, and we've got best practices and how-tos and guides.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions? Justina, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a quick question. So if we throughout the year deactivate a vendor, does it affect anything when we try to process 1099 for them in January?
Are you actually deactivating vendors?
Yes.
I would run your 1099 report. You can even run your 1099 file, because I'm not sure that they will be included if they've been deactivated.
They won't, May. They won't be if it's deactivated. They need to be active.
Thank you, Simone. I was pretty sure that was the case, but I didn't want to be emphatic without knowing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the same would go, like, if you have any employees that you're making inactive and you're doing your year-end items, you want to make sure that everything is active in your system. You should not be current, like, within the year inactivating them. I can see if it's older, like, you know, people who've already closed that year and you want to deactivate them, then that's fine. Some people choose to do that.
Okay. All right.
All right. So as I said, I don't see any other hands up. So, oh, I'm sorry, Yustina, was there other question?
No, I just want to say thank you.
Oh,
That's
you're
all.
welcome. Okay, so in this year, we have something interesting to discuss about 1099s. So at the start of the call, I asked you to log into the JAMIS Open University, go to Courses and On-Demand Learning, and then under Register for Classes, go to the Financial Period, Close, and Reconciliations. And then go to your Period, Close Procedures. You want to make sure you're on the Additional Materials tab, because new this year is that there are changes to the 1099 reporting. So raise your hand if you're familiar with the 2020 changes to 1099s. Okay. Surprised I'm only seeing a few hands up. I'm not going to profess to be the expert on the IRS, but I do have an article here that talks about the required changes for 2020. So in a nutshell, this is what the 1099 form looked like before. And there was a box 7 for non-employee compensation. But starting in 2020, we are required to separate non-employee compensation from all other 1099 categories. So there's two 1099 forms. One is the new 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation. And then there's a new revised 1099 miscellaneous. Now, I did give you an image of this because I think it's important to study and note that when they removed the non-employee compensation, existing numbers changed. So they've reordered the number of things that you thought they might have been, and the form is moved around. So fields that you used to know by number or used to know by location is now someplace else on the new 1099 miscellaneous. So again, if you want to compare last year's form to this year's form, I do have an image of it here. So box 7 isn't non-employee compensation anymore. It's something else. But there is a box 7, which is, I think, confusing on their part, but that is what it is. But what's important for today is that you need to be able to produce compliant 1099 forms based on your 1099 information. So you need to be able to produce a non-employee compensation 1099 if you have anybody that earned 1099 in that category. And you need to be able to produce the new 1099 miscellaneous. So JAMIS has created a customization. This year, you have to load the customization in order to have the correct forms for filing your 1099s. Next year, when you update to a later release, the 1099 forms will become standard in the product. But for this year, in order to be able to get it to you quickly, it's been done as a customization. So this just explains that you need to do a customization, and that the customization is going to give you new forms, new e-file, and also modify your reports. So how do you do this? If you go to the link here, it's going to download a zip package. So if you notice subtly here in my bottom left-hand corner, I have a zip folder downloaded to on my computer. That's at my downloads folder. I just want to download it. I don't need to open it, and do not unzip it. Just download it and know where or what folder that downloaded to. But then you're going to go to your JAMIS Prime. And I actually have a different company for 2020. So you're going to go to, once you've downloaded it from JOU, you're going to come to System, Customization, Manage Customization Projects. Now you personally, everybody who's attending today, you personally may not be the person with the access to do this. But at least you'll know what to discuss and share with the person that does have the ability to manage customizations. There's usually very few people in your company with the actual access rights to customization projects. So don't be surprised that if you can't do this, but at least you can discuss with somebody who does have the access what needs to be done. So you're going to come to your customization projects, and you're going to say import new project. You're going to go to choose the file, which needs to be that zip folder that I just downloaded. So here's my zip folder, and I'm just going to say open. Now I'm going to get an error message because I've already loaded it. But you'll be able to just click upload, and then you'll see it here. Lastly, you're going to select the box on the left-hand side and say publish. Now, when you publish, it's going to take a while. So you're going to get a window that says, do you want to publish it to all companies? We suggest that you do, because this is going to update across your database, even if you only select certain companies. So it's just best to go ahead and select them all. And don't worry about checking either of the two boxes below. Leave them unchecked. So I'm going to check all of these. But I'm not going to check either of these at the bottom. And then I would say OK. And I need to be careful because I've already done this to make sure we had it for today. And then you would say OK. Now, when you say OK, it's going to have a dialog box, and it is going to take a few minutes. Just leave it alone until you get the final green message that says that the website's been done. there is a step in the middle where it's going to ask you that it's going to say that the site's been updated, and there's a button that says publish. You need to click on that and then wait for it to finish. But if it seems to be taking a few minutes, that's okay. That's what it should be doing. The only action you'll need to take is to click on publish when it gets to that. So it's going to run through adding everything in that zip folder. It's going to restart your app pool. It's going to do a whole bunch of things. Then it's going to get to a green message that says that the update is complete. And then you click a publish button in that dialog box. And then sit back and wait until it says it's finished. And then you can close the dialog box, and your new 1099 information will be available. So before I show you the new 1099s, I just want to make sure that we started out by logging into the JAMIS Open University, because I'm imagining that many of you on the call today are interested in this article and mostly interested in the customization that you'll need to change your 1099. And I wanted to demonstrate how to do the customization for those of you that do have the access and will need to do this in your company. So
can I say something?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to wait. I had my hand up patiently. So
Sorry.
That's okay. For those that are doing this, one thing that I need to make sure that you are aware of is that you need to schedule this, because if you have users in your system, they cannot be posting process, and it does restart your app pool, which will kick you out of the system. So this should be a scheduled thing that you do where no one is in the system when you're doing this. And, you know, we do have, if you are running into issues with support or whatever, that you can contact us, or if somebody has questions, they can contact us also about this. But the directions that May has provided is very useful. We just have to specify it has to be scheduled, and you cannot be doing it when others are in the system once you're posting or publishing this. I'm sorry.
Correct. And the title of this is Prime 6, any version of 6, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, all versions of 6 this will work for, and then 1099 non-employee compensation. So that's the name of the file, and that's the same as the file that you downloaded. And Simone is correct. I was going to mention here that it does knock everybody out of the system, so you shouldn't be doing this in the middle of the day. Thank you, Simone, for reminding me.
You're welcome. And for those that are on 6.4, you can actually schedule a lockout for when you're doing this. So that's wonderful. The others, you have to just notify everyone.
Or do it when nobody's in.
Right.
It isn't that lengthy. It does take a few minutes, but it's not going to run for hours. At least it hasn't for me. And I've loaded this a couple of times getting ready for today. Thank you, Simone. William, did you have a question? I see your hand up.
No, I don't have a question.
Okay. Brian, how about you?
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Brian, how about you? Do you have a question? Would you do?
Yeah.
Brian?
Yes.
You have the floor.
I'm an administrator and I don't have that customizations projects option.
So even a administrator role, you have to have customizer role to be able to do this.
Oh, okay.
So somebody in your company must have access to this area, because that's where you would go to write inquiries and stuff. But if we need to help modify your roles, or if there's nobody in your organization that has the right role, we can certainly work with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
But it is an additional customizer role above the administrator, I believe. At least it is in my company. I'm not.
Well, the admin role can do it, but I'm not sure if his role was modified. I mean, Brian, I can, yeah, I can take a look at it. Some people, they modify it and you have to have the customizer, but the admin role should be able to see this. So I'll take a look at it.
Thanks.
Because in my company, I did make customizer an additional role because I have a lot of administrators. And I realized I didn't want everybody doing customizations. So any other questions about getting and publishing the customization? Lisa?
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. You said that we will get a notification once the process is done. How do we get that notification?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Did you say that once the process is complete, after I publish, that we will know when the publish is complete because it takes a while? How do we get the message that it is done?
So give me 1 second. I can show you exactly what the message is. If everybody will just bear with me for a minute. It's a little hard to see, but when you click on that OK button, it's going to run through these steps. So you have access to this, Lisa, under the product information area on the dashboard. This is where I did document screen by screen how to publish the customization. I'll show you where it is again. But I demonstrated this screen, selecting all the companies and leaving the bottom boxes unchecked and saying OK. What's going to happen next is it's going to run through this kind of, what I will say, garbly-gook, because I'm not the technical person, but it's telling you what it's doing. It's adding everything to the directories, loading it to the website. So the first thing is it's going to say in green that the validation is finished successfully, and this is that publish button I said you need to click on. Then after you do that, it's going to continue running through additional scripts, and you just leave it alone until you see this website updated. And then you can exit this dialog box. So this is an actual recording of what the customization will look like when you publish it. Did that answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure. If anybody wants to review that customization steps until I get them separated, you can go to the on-demand learning, product releases, and on the 6.3 tab, if anybody remembers, there was a getting started steps that gave you instructions step by step watching the customization load. So you can go through this and jumpstart to the customization. And I'm going to try and extract it from here so that I can give it to you as a standalone. But for today, you do have it in that getting started steps. So I know that many of you were concerned or interested in getting the new 1099 forms. And as I've written in the article for today, to be able to produce your 2020 1099s, you're going to publish the customization, and then you'll be able to run your 1099 reports. So now let me go to Finance, Accounts Payable, and I'm going to go first to Reports, and I'm going to go to my 1099 year summary, Sorry, that wasn't the one I wanted. Go to my 1099. Oh, sorry, it is on the reports tab. I'm not paying attention. Under forms, there's your 1099 miscellaneous form. It's still called miscellaneous form in the navigation pane, but now when you come to the 1099 form, after you publish the customization, it's going to change your report parameters. You do need to enter the company. And this took me a minute to figure out, but that's actually the branch name. So I'm going to go to my system, my configuration, configure branches. Some of you I know have more than one branch. So you'll have to do this individually for each branch. But this is my branch ID. I'm just going to copy that exactly as it is and go back to my 1099 and paste it in. It doesn't have the little red asterisk, but it is a required field. Then you select the 2020 year. Did I change companies? I did. Oh, drats. Okay, it does work. Yes, ma'am.
Does that little dash at the end have anything to do with it, or is that supposed to be part of it?
Well, on all of the practice for today, it was part of it. But I'm going to give it a try. And of course, that was it. Thank you. So I'm going to pick my 2020 1099 year. And then you have an option. Do you want to print your 1099 form for box 7 only, which is do you want just the non-employee compensation form? Or do you want the miscellaneous form, which is everything but box 7? So you can print the 1099 to look at it, including everything. So here's my vendor, and here's what we'll print as on the overlay that's in the printer. If I wanted to print paper 1099s, this is what it would look like. This is all the information, because when I ran the report, I said, show me all boxes. To actually print 1099s that I can file, I'm going to have to print it once for box 7 only. And you'll notice now for the same vendor, I only have the non-compensated, non-employee compensation. And then if I go back and say everything but box 7, I'll see everything except that information. So once you publish the customization, you have the ability to print the forms to match the forms. And you do need to put in your branch name. Select the 2020 year. And you don't want to do this for any other year, but I'm assuming everybody's already filed their 2019, and 2020 would be the only ones you're filing. And then you can preview them if you want by saying show all boxes, but to file, you're going to print it once for box 7 and again without box 7. The e-file, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't have that option in my JAMS. It just showed me 1099 2020. I don't even have the choice for company name and others.
You won't until you publish the customization.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. because that's what the customization did, was add all of these parameters. So I'm only seeing it because I published it. And then all the same, the customization also updates your e-file options. So again, I'm going to select my year, and then am I selecting box 7 only, or everything except box 7? So whether I'm printing paper 1099s or filing e-file, the other thing is the current 1099 customization is updated for the new states that opted out of e-filing. So it does update this e-file so that it only includes the states that have opted in. I think it might have been Vermont maybe that withdrew from the e-file. There was some state anyway, it doesn't really matter. So when you publish the customization, it will automatically update the e-file, and only for the states that are opting in 2020. So I did want to make sure that I gave everyone an opportunity to ask questions and to see this in process, since it is a matter of publishing the customization and then having access to the new 1099 forms. But the purpose of this entire webinar was to prepare you and give you some comfort in preparing for your year end if December is the end of your fiscal year. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.